It is pitch black. You are likely to be eaten by a grue. If those two sentences ring a bell, you're probably familiar with Zork. And if you're not familiar with Zork, let me tell you a bit about it, or at least let me recommend some sources that will tell you about it. Welcome to PhD&D everyone, and this is another episode of Use This Source, a series whose title functions less and less as an accurate description with each episode, because in this episode, I'm going to tell you about not one, but several books. The Zork series in Infocom's What Do I Do Now books. Because the phrase choose your own adventure was already trademarked by the company that prints choose your own adventure books, Infocom, the company that owned Zork and all of its trademarks, had to use the phrase what do I do now instead. And it was through these books, these branching path adventure books that had self-aware humor and interesting dungeon building, that I first got exposed not only to the world of Zork, but basically to fantasy literature as a kid. Indeed, my whole interest in tabletop role-playing games and the reasons why I started to play around with D&D as a child all stem from the fact that I love choose-your-own-adventure books and other such books so much. The idea of literature that I could interact with in a creative way was really enticing and intoxicating to me. And so I gravitated towards these kinds of books, and I really loved the Zork books by Eric Meretzky, the most. There were only 4 of them, unfortunately. They're called, in order, The Conquest of Krill, The Malifestro Quest, The Cavern of Doom, and A Conquest at Quendor. Each one features the same 2 protagonists, a young boy and a young girl. In our world, they're named Bill and June, but as soon as they show up in the Kingdom of Zork, they always get transported there from the real world, they're immediately recognized as the legendary heroes Bivitar and Duranda. And what you get across these 4 books are some really fun fantasy adventuring with interesting choices, really creative, memorable ways to die, and a lot of fourth wall breaking, self-aware humor that lampshades on and builds on, in creative ways, not derisive ones, tropes of that genre. I encountered a lot of fun situations, including lethal ones, especially lethal ones, that even today contribute to how I run tabletop games and how I write adventures. It was in these books that I encountered the fun situation where our heroes tell a gnome that they will pay for something once they get to the other side of a bridge. And once they're all on the other side, the heroes then reveal that they offered to pay once they're on the other side. Now that they've crossed the bridge, the other side is way over there, so they're still not paying. That's a fun little trick that you might play with a fae-like creature. I also encountered for the first time that situation where fantasy heroes think that they're crawling through a narrow cave passage, but they notice that the floor is somewhat slimy and pliable, and that the stalactites and stalagmites are curiously pale and exactly curved in a certain way, and then, gulp, the cave behemoth gets a meal. I also got to know the monsters known as grues, deadly flesh-shredding creatures that exist wherever there is darkness, and darkness exists wherever they are. All you know is that they're in the dark and that they'll tear you apart. That's why that line from the original computer game is so memorable. It is pitch black. You are likely to be eaten by a grue. That's often the last thing a player sees before their character dies. I've mentioned the self-aware humor and the fourth wall breaking that happens in the Zork world. There are additional bits of fun with this in the books, the adventure books I mean, because occasionally the books will give you opportunities to cheat. You'll reach a decision point where it says, did you get the key from under the well? And if you say yes, you go on to one thing. If you say no, you go on to another thing. There are a few options where it asks you if you remembered to get something that isn't in the book. And if you say yes at that point, the book severely chastises you and scolds you for cheating in really harsh terms that kind of traumatized me as a kid. I still remember it. Like, there's one point where if you say yes to the question of whether you have these magic sneakers, then a sorcerer is described as appearing right next to you, and they grab the book that you're reading and then scold you that you're the worst cheater ever and you get negative 1,000,000 points or something like that. It's hilarious. It's really funny. If you read The Chronicles of Zork by George Alec Effinger, you find that there's this funny world where all gods and fantasy creatures get together and they apply for industry awards. Like they're all vying to win the Campbell Award, which is, given out once every eon to the best fantasy hero or the most epic fantasy heroes. There's a lot of really fun humor in the Zork series, too. There aren't that many Zork books now, unfortunately. I don't think there ever will be any more. But there are 4 Zork sort of choose-your-own-adventure books, or What Do I Do Now books. I highly recommend them. I also recommend The Chronicles of Zork by George Alec Effinger, The Lost City of Zork by Robin Bailey, and also the Encyclopedia Frabosica, which is actually an instruction book for a video game, but it has a lot of fun lore in there that you could just use for your tabletop role-playing if you want to put your PCs in some kind of Zork situation. Anyway, what do you know about Zork? Have you heard of it before? Are you interested? Let me know in the comments. Thanks very much for watching. Don't forget to do all the internet things. Click like and subscribe. Don't forget to hit the bell icon if you want notifications about new videos on my channel. And thanks very much. Don't get eaten by grus.